Have you ever noticed how desperately we cling to existence? How we frantically grasp at every moment as if it might be our last? We live in constant rebellion against the most natural process in the universe. Death terrifies us so completely that we've constructed elaborate fantasies to deny its reality. But what if I told you that your fear is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? What if death as you conceive it is the greatest illusion ever perpetrated on human consciousness? I want to take you on a journey today, not to some exotic location or altered state, but rather into the very heart of what you think you are. Because once you truly understand what you are, you'll discover something absolutely astonishing, something that has been hidden from you in plain sight all along. You will never die. Not because you'll live forever in your present form, but because what you truly are was never born and cannot die. Let me show you why. Chapter 1, The Myth of Permanence. The first thing to understand is that we've been thoroughly hoodwinked by a cultural myth so pervasive that we rarely question it. We have been led to believe that things, solid, permanent things, actually exist. But when you look closely, when you really pay attention, you'll see that nothing in this universe has ever stayed the same for even a fraction of a second. Consider your own body. The cells that constitute your flesh are constantly dying and being replaced. The atoms that make up those cells are in perpetual motion. The thoughts in your mind arise and dissolve like waves on the ocean. The emotions you feel flow through you like weather patterns. Where in all of this flux and flow is the permanent you that could die? You see, we've confused ourselves with language. We say, I am alive, as if I were a fixed entity that possesses this quality called life. But this is a grammatical convenience, not a reality. It's as absurd as saying, it is raining, as though there were some it separate from the rain that is doing the raining. What we call life isn't something you have. It's what you are. You don't possess life any more than the ocean possesses wetness. The ocean doesn't have wetness, it is wetness. And you don't have life, you are life itself, temporarily manifesting in this peculiar form you call me. Now, if there is no permanent you to begin with, what exactly do you think is going to die? The fear of death is based on the assumption that you are something stable, something fixed, something that could be lost. But I'm suggesting that you look more carefully. What if you aren't a noun at all, but a verb? Not a thing, but a process? Not a being, but a becoming? If you can begin to sense what I'm pointing at, that permanence itself is the illusion, not impermanence, then you're already on your way to understanding why death, as an end to what you are, is impossible. Because what you are is not something that could end. What you are is the endless transformation of energy and consciousness that comprises this entire cosmos. Tentar novamente, SL prosiga, editar, chapter 2, the ego's greatest fear. Now, let's talk about this peculiar structure we call the ego. This sensation of being a separate self, little man or woman inside your head, looking out through your eyes at a world that seems fundamentally other than you. What a fascinating game we've been playing. You see, the ego, this sense of isolated selfhood, has one overwhelming terror. It's not pain, not even suffering. It's extinction. The ego is terrified of ceasing to be because its entire existence is predicated on maintaining the boundary between me in here and everything else out there. And death appears to be the ultimate dissolution of that boundary. But I want you to consider something rather revolutionary. What if this ego, this sensation of separate selfhood, isn't what you really are at all? What if it's more like a game you're playing, a limitation you've temporarily accepted, a costume you've put on? Think of it this way. When you go to the theater to see a play, there's an unspoken agreement between the audience and the actors. We agree to temporarily believe that the man on stage really is Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, and not just an actor named John who lives in the suburbs and has a mortgage. We willingly participate in this fiction because it's entertaining, because it allows for a certain kind of experience. In the same way, you have agreed to believe that you are this separate self, this ego. And you've become so absorbed in the role that you've forgotten it's just that, a role. You've forgotten that underneath the character is something far more profound and far less limited. This is why the ego fears death so intensely. Because death is the ultimate reminder that the show doesn't go on forever. The ego is like an actor who has become so identified with his role that he's terrified of the final curtain, forgetting completely that when the play ends, he doesn't end. He simply returns to being who he really was all along. What dies at death is not you, but a particular pattern, a temporary arrangement, a specific performance. The actor doesn't die when Hamlet dies, and you don't die when this particular manifestation of consciousness that you call me reaches its conclusion. Once you begin to sense this, really sense it, not just intellectually understand it, the ego's greatest fear begins to lose its grip. Death becomes not an end to what you are, but simply a transformation, a changing of costume, a shift in the endless play of consciousness exploring itself. And isn't that a far more exciting proposition than some dreary eternal continuation of your current limited perspective? Chapter 3, Death, the Ultimate Taboo. It's rather fascinating, isn't it? How Western civilization has developed such a peculiar relationship with death. We've made it the ultimate taboo. We hide it away in hospitals and funeral homes. We use euphemisms, passed away, departed, gone to a better place, anything to avoid looking directly at the simple fact of death. But this wasn't always the case, and it isn't the case in many other cultures. In medieval Europe, people kept memento mori, tokens to remind them of their mortality. In Mexico, they celebrate the Day of the Dead with feasts and festivities. In Tibet, monks meditate in charnel grounds, surrounded by decaying bodies. These cultures understood something we've forgotten, that confronting death directly is the key to living fully. You see, the more we avoid thinking about death, the more power it has over us. It becomes this shadowy monster lurking at the edge of consciousness, tainting our joy with its inevitable approach. But when we look at it directly, something quite remarkable happens. It begins to transform from an ending into a perspective. Eastern traditions have long understood this. In Zen Buddhism, they speak of the great death, not the physical death of the body, but the death of the illusion of separateness. The recognition that what you thought you were was never really there to begin with. And in this great death is found the most profound liberation. The Upanishads tell us, Tattvam asi, thou art that. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself from a particular vantage point. And when that vantage point shifts, as it inevitably will, nothing essential is lost. The universe continues its grand exploration through countless other forms. This perspective doesn't deny the very real grief we feel when someone we love dies. That pain is real and should be honored. But it does suggest that our grief is based partly on a misunderstanding, the idea that the person we loved has been annihilated, has ceased to be altogether. What if they've simply returned to the source from which they temporarily emerged? What if, in some profound sense, they're still here, just not in the limited form we had grown accustomed to? Death isn't the opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth. Life has no opposite. Life is the ground of being itself, the eternal context in which birth and death occur. You don't have life, you are an expression of life. And expressions may change, but that which is being expressed remains. Tentar novamente. SLE, Prosiga, Editar. Chapter 4, Beyond the Subject, Object Divide. Now we come to something truly fascinating. The root of our fear of death lies in what philosophers call the subject-object divide, this sensation that there is a me in here and a world out there with some kind of boundary between the two. But I want to suggest that this boundary is an illusion, a convenient fiction that has outlived its usefulness. Let me ask you something. Where exactly do you end? At your skin? But your skin is constantly exchanging molecules with the air around it. Your lungs are taking in oxygen and expelling carbon dioxide. Your digestive system is transforming food, which was once not you, into you. The atoms in your body today are not the same atoms that were there 7 years ago. What about your mind? Does that define the boundary of you? But your thoughts are shaped by the language you speak, the books you've read, the conversations you've had. Your mind is a meeting place for influences that extend far beyond anything you could call yourself. You see, when you really look for this boundary between subject and object, between self and world, it simply cannot be found. It's not that it's hidden or obscured, it's that it was never there to begin with. It's a conceptual overlay that we've placed upon reality for practical purposes, but it doesn't correspond to anything real. And this has profound implications for how we understand death. If there is no boundary between you and the universe, then you cannot be separated from it. You cannot be expelled from it. You cannot cease to be part of it. You are not in the universe, you are the universe. Not a fragment of it, not a piece, but the whole thing expressing itself here and now as this particular pattern called you. Consider a whirlpool in a flowing stream. The whirlpool has a distinct form, a particular pattern that we can point to and say, there's a whirlpool. But the whirlpool is not separate from the stream. It's just the stream whirlpooling. And when the whirlpool subsides, nothing dies. The stream simply flows on in a different pattern. In the same way, you are the universe youing. You are not a thing but a process, a verb rather than a noun. And processes don't die, they simply transform. The universe that is currently expressing itself, as you will continue to express itself, in countless other forms. Nothing is lost, nothing ends, everything transforms. So you see, when you go beyond the subject-object divide, when you recognize that there is no boundary between you and everything else, death loses its sting. It's no longer an expulsion from existence, but simply a transformation of form. And in this recognition lies a freedom so profound that few dare to embrace it fully. Chapter 5. The Cosmic Game of Hide and Seek. Have you ever considered that the universe might be playing an elaborate game of hide and seek with itself? That consciousness, this extraordinary, indefinable awareness that you are experiencing right now, might be the fundamental reality, pretending to be all these separate things. What a marvelous idea! You see, in Hindu philosophy, they speak of Brahman, the ultimate reality, the ground of being, playing a game called Leela, divine play. And in this play, Brahman pretends to be all the separate entities in the universe. It divides itself into seemingly distinct forms, stars, planets, trees, animals, humans, and then it pretends that these divisions are real. It forgets that it is the one pretending to be the many. Why would it do this? Well, for the same reason children play hide and seek. Because it's fun. Because there's a peculiar delight in forgetting temporarily who you really are. There's excitement in the game of limitation, in the thrill of rediscovery. And death in this grand scheme is nothing more than consciousness saying, all right, I've played at being this particular form long enough. What shall I be next? It's the moment in hide and seek when one game ends and another begins. Nothing is lost. Nothing is diminished. The players simply change positions. Now, I'm not asking you to believe this as a dogma or a creed. I'm simply inviting you to try it on as a perspective, to see how it feels, to explore what happens when you view life and death through this lens. Because belief is rigid, but exploration is alive. What if your life isn't a desperate journey from birth to death, but a temporary role in an eternal play? What if you are not a fragmentary, isolated consciousness doomed to extinction, but the one consciousness playing at being many? What if behind the mask of your personhood lies the face of the universe itself? In this perspective, death becomes not an ending but an intermission, not a tragedy but a costume change, not something to fear but something to be curious about. Because you, the real you, not the temporary pattern but the awareness that animates it, never left the theater. You were always here, always now, always the one looking out through countless eyes. And in those moments when the veil of separation thins, in deep meditation, in profound love, in the grip of extraordinary beauty, you might catch a glimpse of your true face. The face you had before you were born. The awareness that was never limited to this body, this mind, this particular collection of memories and desires that you call me. So you see, in the cosmic game of hide and seek, death is not the end of the game. It's just the seeker closing their eyes to count again before a new round begins. And the game goes on, endlessly creative, endlessly renewed, endlessly playful. Tentar novamente. SL. Prosegur. Editar. Chapter 6. The Eternal Now. Now, there's another fascinating aspect to this puzzle of death, and it has to do with our understanding of time. We've been conditioned to think of time as a line stretching from past to future, with the present as a moving point along that line. But what if this model is fundamentally misleading? What if time doesn't flow at all? You see, it's curious that the only time you ever experience is now. The past exists only as memory, which occurs now. The future exists only as anticipation, which occurs now. You have never, not once in your entire life, experienced anything other than the present moment. Yet we spend most of our lives mentally dwelling in a past that no longer exists, or a future that doesn't yet exist, rarely noticing the extraordinary fact that we are always, only, ever here. This isn't just some philosophical abstraction. It has profound implications for how we understand death. Because if the only time that ever exists is now, then there is no future moment in which you die. There is only ever this moment, this eternal now, constantly changing its content, but never its essential nature. Consider this. If you are alive now, and I assume you are if you're listening to this, then the only time you ever experience is a time in which you are alive. You will never experience a time in which you are dead, because experience itself is what we mean by being alive. So in the only time that exists for you, now, you are always alive. Always. Death, then, is not something that happens to you. It's something that happens to others' perception of you. From your perspective, there is only ever the flowing now, the eternal present in which experience unfolds. And since experience is always now, and now is always alive with experience, there is no experiential death. There is transformation, certainly. Change, absolutely. But not the kind of terminal ending that we fear. This is why the mystics and sages throughout history have spoken of eternity not as endless time, but as the transcendence of time altogether. Eternity isn't living forever. It's living completely in the now, where forever is always present. It's recognizing that the essential nature of consciousness, this aware presence that you are, exists outside the apparent flow of time as the unchanging context in which all change occurs. So when we talk about never dying, we're not talking about the perpetuation of a particular form through endless time. We're talking about the recognition that what you essentially are exists outside of time altogether as the eternal now in which all temporal phenomena appear and disappear. From this perspective, you don't need to live forever, because you already live in the only moment there is, the eternal now. And in that now, consciousness is always alive, always aware, always present. Death is a story about the future, but you only ever live now. And now is always alive. Do you see the extraordinary freedom in this? The liberation from the fear of a future that never arrives? The recognition that what you are doesn't move through time, time moves through what you are. Chapter 7. Waves on the ocean. Let me offer you one of my favorite metaphors for understanding this mystery of life and death. Imagine the ocean, vast, deep, powerful. And on the surface of this ocean arise waves. Countless waves, each with its own particular shape and size, each lasting for a certain duration before subsiding back into the sea. Now, if you were to ask a wave, "What are you?" it might respond, "I am this particular pattern, this specific form. I was born when the wind blew across the water, and I will die when I crash upon the shore. And in one sense this would be true. The wave, as a distinct pattern, does arise and does subside. But in a deeper sense, what is the wave really? 0, 5. Is it not simply the ocean waving? The wave isn't something separate from the ocean. It's what the ocean is doing at that particular point in space and time. And when the wave subsides, nothing has died. The ocean hasn't lost anything. It simply changed its shape, shifted its energy. You are like that wave. You appear as a distinct form, a particular pattern in the vast ocean of consciousness. And yes, that pattern will change, just as the wave changes. But the ocean remains. The consciousness that expresses itself as you isn't diminished or destroyed when your particular form changes. It simply flows on, expressing itself in countless other forms. Now, the wave might be terrified of crashing on the shore, seeing it as a kind of death. But if the wave understood its true nature as the ocean, it would recognize that reaching the shore isn't an end but simply a transformation. The energy that expressed itself as a wave doesn't disappear. It returns to the ocean and eventually expresses itself in new waves. In the same way, the energy and consciousness that express themselves as you don't disappear at death, they simply return to the source and eventually express themselves in new forms. Nothing is lost, nothing is wasted, everything transforms. I'm not talking about reincarnation in the traditional sense of your ego, your personality, your collection of memories moving into a new body. That would be like saying one wave becomes another specific wave. No, it's more profound than that. It's the recognition that what you essentially are, the consciousness, the awareness, the ocean, was never confined to this particular wave to begin with. So you see, when we say you will never die, we don't mean that this specific pattern called you will persist indefinitely. We mean that what you essentially are, the ocean, not the wave, was never born and cannot die. It is the eternal context in which birth and death occur, the unchanging awareness in which all changes appear. And in recognizing this, in shifting your identity from the temporary wave to the eternal ocean, lies a freedom beyond imagining, a peace that doesn't depend on permanence, a joy that isn't shadowed by the fear of loss, a life that isn't distorted by the denial of death. Tentar novamente, SLE, Prosiga, Editar, Chapter 8. The Dream of Separateness. Let's explore another angle of this fascinating puzzle. Have you ever considered that perhaps what we call normal waking consciousness is actually a kind of dream? Not in some vague metaphorical sense, but quite literally, a dream of separateness from which we might one day awaken. When you dream at night, the dream seems completely real while you're in it. You don't realize you're dreaming until you wake up. And then suddenly with that awakening comes the recognition, oh, that was just a dream. I am actually here in my bed. I am not that dream character who was being chased by lions or flying over mountains. What if our normal waking consciousness is similar? What if we're dreaming that we are separate selves, isolated individuals cut off from the rest of existence? What if death is simply the moment of awakening from this dream? Now, I don't mean to suggest that this physical world isn't real, or that your experiences don't matter. They are real, and they do matter, just as the experiences in a dream are real to the dreamer. But perhaps they're real in a different way than we usually assume. Perhaps they're real as experiences rather than as objective, independent realities. In the Upanishads, there's a beautiful Sanskrit phrase, Tat Tvam Asi. It means, thou art that. You are that which you have been seeking. You are not separate from the divine, from the ground of being, from the fundamental reality. You are it, looking out through these eyes, hearing through these ears, thinking through this mind. But we've been conditioned to believe otherwise. We've been taught that we are isolated fragments in a universe of other fragments. We've been led to believe that we're born, live for a while, and then are annihilated. This is the dream of separateness, and it's from this dream that death awakens us. When you're dreaming at night, and the dream turns into a nightmare, you want to wake up. You want to escape the dream because it's become frightening or painful. But when the dream is pleasant, you're content to remain in it. In the same way, we cling to this dream of separateness when it's pleasant, and we fear death because it seems to threaten this pleasant dream. But what if death is not a threat but an awakening? What if it's the moment when you realize, I am not just this separate self with this particular name and these specific memories. I am the awareness in which all selves, all names, all memories arise and subside. This is what the mystics and sages throughout history have been telling us, not as a belief to be accepted on faith, but as a direct experience available to anyone willing to look deeply enough. They tell us that we can awaken from the dream of separateness even while still in this body, still in this life. We don't have to wait for physical death. This awakening has been called many things: enlightenment, liberation, salvation, satori. But all these terms point to the same essential recognition that what you thought you were was a dream, and what you really are is the dreamer. Not a thing in the universe, but the awareness in which the entire universe appears. And from this perspective, physical death loses its sting. It becomes not an end to what you are, but simply a transformation in how you appear. The dreamer continues, even as the dream changes. The awareness remains, even as its contents shift. You, the real you, not the dream character, but the dreamer, will never die. Chapter 9. Reincarnation versus transformation. Now, many traditions speak of reincarnation, the idea that after death you will be reborn in another body, perhaps as a human again, perhaps as some other creature. 0, 5. And there's a certain appealing logic to this. It suggests continuity, persistence, the comfort of knowing that you will go on. But I want to suggest a more subtle, and I think more profound understanding. Not reincarnation, but transformation. Not the same entity returning in a new form, but energy and consciousness forever expressing themselves in new and creative ways. You see, the traditional view of reincarnation often assumes that there is some essential you, some soul or Atman, that remains the same through different incarnations. But this still clings to the idea of a separate self, just one that persists through multiple lifetimes rather than a single one. It's still caught in the dream of separateness. What if instead we recognize that there is no separate you to begin with? That what you call you is actually the universe expressing itself in a particular pattern, a temporary arrangement, a specific dance of energy and consciousness. Then death becomes not the departure of a soul from a body, but the reorganization of energy and the transformation of form. Think of it this way. The atoms in your body were once part of stars. Literally. The heavier elements in your body, the carbon, the oxygen, the nitrogen, were forged in the nuclear furnaces of ancient stars that exploded billions of years ago, scattering their elements across space. Those atoms eventually became part of this planet, then part of the plants and animals that you consumed, and now they're part of you. And when you die, those atoms won't disappear. They'll simply rearrange themselves once again. Perhaps they'll become part of the soil, then part of a tree, then part of a bird that eats the fruit of that tree. The material of your body will live on in countless other forms. In the same way, the consciousness that expresses itself as you will continue to express itself in countless other forms. Not as the same entity, not as you, with your particular memories and personality, but as awareness itself, forever exploring, forever experiencing, forever transforming. This isn't a lesser form of immortality, it's a greater one. It's not the perpetuation of a limited self, but participation in the unlimited dance of being. It's not clinging to one note in the symphony, but becoming the entire music. So you see, you will live again, not as the same entity in a new body, but as the same consciousness in countless new forms. The energy that animates you now will animate other beings in the future. The awareness that looks out through your eyes now will look out through other eyes in times to come. Nothing is lost. Everything transforms. And in this recognition lies a profound sense of connection to all life, past, present, and future. You are not separate from the great flow of being. You are that flow, temporarily expressing itself as this particular pattern called you. And when this pattern changes, as all patterns must, the flow continues, undiminished, uninterrupted, forever creative, forever alive. Tentar novamente, S.L. Prosiga, Editar, Chapter 10, The Cosmic Laughter. Now we come to what may be the most liberating aspect of this exploration, the cosmic laughter. There's a wonderful saying in Zen: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. But what they don't tell you is that after enlightenment, you laugh while chopping wood and carrying water. You see, once you begin to sense what we've been discussing, that death is not the termination of what you are, but simply a transformation, that your essential nature was never born and cannot die, that separation is an illusion, and unity is the reality. A curious thing happens. You start to see the cosmic joke. The joke is this: we've been terrified of losing something we never actually had, and of becoming something we already are. We've been running from death as if it could separate us from life, when in fact there is nowhere to go and nothing to be separated from. We are like waves fleeing the ocean, not realizing we are the ocean. And when you see this, really see it, laughter is the only appropriate response. This isn't the cynical laughter of despair or the bitter laughter of resignation. It's the joyful laughter of recognition, the liberating laughter of seeing through the cosmic game. It's the laughter that comes when you realize you've been taking yourself far too seriously, identifying with a role rather than with the actor who plays countless roles. The Zen masters understood this. That's why they would sometimes respond to profound philosophical questions with nonsensical answers or fits of laughter. They weren't being disrespectful. They were pointing to the inherent absurdity of trying to capture reality in concepts, of trying to nail down the ever-flowing, ever-changing dance of existence. In India, they have this beautiful concept of Leela, divine play. The idea that the universe isn't a machine grinding inexorably towards some final state, nor a moral test to determine who gets rewarded and who gets punished. It's a play, a dance, a spontaneous expression of joy and creativity. And once you see this, death becomes not an ending to be feared, but a transformation to be embraced, not a failure, but a plot twist in the cosmic drama. I remember once sitting with a Zen master who was clearly approaching the end of his life. A student asked him, "Master, are you afraid to die?" The old man smiled and said, "Why should I fear becoming what I already am?" And then he laughed, not nervously, not bitterly, but with genuine delight, as if he'd just heard the world's best joke, which in a way he had. You see, the fear of death is based on the illusion that you are something fragile and temporary that could be lost. But what if you're not? What if what you truly are is indestructible, not because it's permanent, but because it's ever-changing? Not because it persists through time, but because it transcends time altogether? The Buddha compared life to a flame being passed from one candle to another. Is it the same flame? Is it a different flame? These questions miss the point. It's flame itself, the process, the energy, the light that continues, not any particular manifestation of flame. In the same way, it's consciousness itself, awareness itself, being itself that continues, not any particular manifestation of consciousness. And here's the real cosmic joke. There is no you that will die because there never was a separate you to begin with. What dies is the illusion of separateness, the dream of being a fragment rather than the whole. And in that death is the greatest freedom imaginable, the recognition that what you are was never in danger, never at risk, never subject to destruction. So laugh. Laugh at the cosmic joke. Laugh at the game of hide and seek that consciousness plays with itself. Laugh at the idea that you could ever be separate from the universe that gave birth to you. Laugh at the notion that death could ever be anything other than another transformation in the endless dance of being. And in that laughter find liberation. not the grim, serious liberation of spiritual strivers, but the light, joyful liberation of those who've seen through the game and decided to play it anyway, with full awareness, with open hearts, with cosmic laughter. Final reflection. As we come to the end of our exploration, I want to leave you with a thought. We began by considering the frightening proposition that death might be the absolute end, the final extinction of what you are. And we've journeyed together to a radically different understanding that death is not your end, but simply a transformation, not a termination, but a transition. But don't take my word for it. Don't accept this as a belief or a dogma. Test it. Explore it. Look deeply into your own experience and see what you find. Because ultimately the question of what happens when you die can only be answered by discovering what you are while you live. And this is the great invitation of life, to discover before physical death comes what lies beyond the separate self, to recognize while still embodied the awareness that is not confined to the body, to know in the midst of time the eternal now that transcends time. This is not a morbid fascination with death, but a profound engagement with life. Because when you no longer fear death, you can fully embrace life. When you're no longer running from the inevitable, you can be fully present with the immediate. When you're no longer desperately clinging to a separate self, you can experience the connectedness that was always your birthright. So I leave you with this. You will never die, not because your current form will persist forever, but because what you truly are was never born in the first place. You are not a thing in the universe. You are the universe temporarily expressing itself as a thing. You are not a fragment of the whole. You are the whole expressing itself as a seeming fragment. And in the recognition of this lies the end of fear, the birth of love, and the cosmic laughter that liberates. Not in some future state, not after physical death, but here and now, in this very moment, which is the only moment there ever is. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May you discover for yourself what cannot be lost, what cannot die, what you have always been beneath the masks and roles and dreams of separateness. May you awaken to your true nature and find in that awakening not just the end of the fear of death, but the beginning of a life lived in the light of what is real, what is true, what is eternal, in the midst of endless change. And when you do, perhaps you too will join in the cosmic laughter.